We're hearing that a ground operation by the Israeli Defence Forces into Gaza is likely. What should we expect?
Thank you, Miriam, for having me. I think we can refer back to the developments of the last 18 months in the West Bank to get a bit of a better understanding of what we might see and what the implications might be of this major offensive. We have seen ground offensives, though, at a much smaller scale in the West Bank, in particularly the northern areas, targeting the towns of Nablus and Yenin. And these were the targets for ground offensives because they are considered the stronghold of a militant Palestinian resistance, consisting of different groups and organizations. And what we can learn from these targeted ground offensives in the West Bank is that it's extremely difficult to distinguish between a militant, for example, or a student who supports the resistance and the call for a popular uprising and is not a militant, and other civilians who might enter the streets in support of a resistance as a whole, but do not support or partake in any militant actions.
So what does that then present for both sides in terms of how this might get underway? In the case of the Israeli Defence Forces, what sort of strategies might they deploy? And what might we expect then for those communities in Gaza where, as you say, it's so difficult to distinguish between civilian and militant?
Well, the reason behind the ground offensive, as we've heard, is to eliminate Hamas, including its leadership and its military arm, the Al-Qassam brigades, and release any Israeli hostages. But we are unclear at this point still how this major offensive will be executed and how these distinctions will be made between who is a Hamas a real threat to Israel at this point and who are there to support Hamas resistance as a symbol for Palestinian resistance, and under the current circumstances, the only force who can protect civilians in Gaza. And I think that distinction is something that we really need to get some clarity on as to how IDF soldiers who will be entering Gaza, how they are trained to differentiate between militants and between those who are defending their homes and lives in Gaza.
As you point out there, the situation around the hostages taken by Hamas, that remains incredibly precarious. How likely is it that we will see a positive outcome?
I think at this point, with the numbers we see at the Gaza border in the hundreds of thousands, I think this is a very important time in history. And I think, again, that these questions, they need to really be asked, and we need to have some clear answers from Israel and the IDF as to how the IDF is going to distinguish between their targets. And I'm concerned at who will be wiped out, to use the rhetoric of the IDF, and how face-to-face conflict will be unfolded on the streets of Gaza, resulting in even more Israeli and even more Palestinian deaths.
Of course, we also consider the implications here more broadly. What's the possibility of other countries then being drawn into the conflict?
I think other countries have been clear about their stance on this to some degree, though we are still unsure. The same distinctions are not yet made as to whether some countries are supporting the Palestinian resistance, whether they are supporting a violent retaliation, in this case from Hamas. And on the side of Israel, I guess there's more clarity in terms of what kind of support Israel is receiving at this stage. But again, this support is it's very unclear as to what the US, for example, what they are supporting at this point. Are they supporting the extermination of Hamas? And then they need to also be sure as to what the collateral damage is of that and the strategies around that. We really need to have a clear understanding of what the military strategy is at this point. And we still don't know when these groups and if these ground offensives are actually going to take place.
Dr. Susan de Groot Heupner, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and analysis. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miriam.